So now comes a time to clean up the logo. Now you might think this looks finished and clean enough. However, if we zoom in, I'm going to show you something relating to anchor points. Now with the direct selection tool, if we select a character, I'm going to select the R, you'll see a load of anchor points here. You'll also note, having zoomed in, that this is misshapen here. It's very slight, but it's misshapen. So this is something that needs to be corrected here. Now, as for the anchor points, there's an anchor point here in the middle of the curve, as there is here and here. Now these anchor points are unnecessary. For a curve of this nature, all there should be is an anchor point to define the start of the curve and an anchor point to define the end of the curve. And there should be no anchor points in between those two. If any more anchor points are present, then this can disrupt the flow of the curve. And it's particularly important to have a clean graphic when it comes to developing the logo in materials. Say if the logo was cut out in plastic or metal, for example, we want that curve to be as smooth as possible. Any unnecessary anchor points may disrupt the flow of the curve and add divots or, at worst, points to the material. So if this was cut out of metal and it so happened that an anchor point was defining a tiny little spike in a curve, then this spike would be rendered out of the material. So in a nutshell, the graphic must consist of as few anchor points as possible. In turn, this reduces the complication of the graphic and the file size. So with the direct selection tool still selected, I'm now going to go over the other characters to take a quick look at what might need to be corrected. So moving on to the I, you'll see we have the unnecessary anchor point again on this curve, which is the same as the curve on the R. Moving on to the D, here we have the anchor point again on that similar curve, one here, and one here on this vertical. We also have one down here and a series of them on the inside. Moving on to the E, again, anchor points here, here, and here, and a series of them on the inside again here, similar to the D. Now the Z, lastly, we have one here, perhaps another one, and a couple down here. So I'm going to go on to show you how we can remedy these issues and how we can make the graphic perfect with minimal anchor points. So I'm going to group everything here, object group, and I'm going to make a copy. So using Alt and Shift to pull down a copy here. And I'm going to color hot pink, and I'm going to go to the properties and I'm going to bring the opacity down to around 10% here. Now I'm going to lock this by going to the layers panel and clicking the padlock so that it appears in the layer next to the layer that I want to lock. Now I'm going to create another copy. Again, Alt and Shift, dragging one down, and I'm going to place this directly on top of the previous. Now the version at the bottom is the focus, so I'm going to zoom in. Now with the direct selection tool, I'm going to click upon this R, and you'll see again all the anchor points in this character and the ones that need to be altered, this one here, and removed for the ones on the curves. So focusing on this first, I'm actually going to go to the pen tool and use the delete anchor point tool. I'm going to click upon this anchor point to remove the central one between these two anchor points because that's unnecessary. Now I'm going to use a direct selection tool to drag the curve back out to where it originally was in accordance with the graphic beneath. Like so. Next, I'm going to use the same tool, the delete anchor point tool, to delete this point on the corner. And with the direct selection tool, I'm going to use these handles to bring the curve out to the original place, matching the pink version of the logo beneath, like so. Again, I'm going to do the same for this down here, this anchor point, and I'm going to use a control handle again to drag out the curve to where it originally was, in accordance with the pink version of the logo behind. Now I'm going to move on to the eye. I'm going to do that again. I'm going to delete that anchor point on the curve, and I'm going to use the control handle to pull it out to where the curve originally was. So that marks completion of the eye. Moving on to the D. So now moving on to the E. So let's go ahead and delete this anchor point because we'll have these two anchor points defining the curve. So using direct selection tool to put that back where it originally was. Like so. Next is this anchor point because we have these two defining this curve. So here we have the logo with the text in a state of perfection. Now the symbol is no exception, so we're going to go in and take a look at that. So zooming in, using the direct selection tool, I'm going to select the shape at the bottom first. Already I can see a group of anchor points up here where there should only be one. I can see a pair of anchor points here where there should only be one, and likewise on the right hand side there should only be one anchor point on this pair. I can also see a group of anchor points up here. So it's these I'm going to fix so that the shape's more perfect with minimal anchor points. So zooming out, I'm going to take a copy of the logo, Alt and Shift. I'm going to colour this pink. I'm going to bring the opacity down to 10% as I did before. In the layers panel, I'm going to lock this down, the pink version. And I'm going to take another copy, dragging it down and placing it directly on the top of the pink version. So now zooming in, I'm going to get to work. Now, clicking upon the shape to reveal the anchor points, I'm going to use the delete anchor point tool and I'm going to click upon this anchor point and you'll see it adjusts this curve. So I'm going to pull out with this anchor point to match the shape beneath. Now I don't need to do the same on the other side because of course this is a symmetrical shape. I can simply copy the right hand side over to the left. So just quickly zooming in to check that that matches up nicely, which it does. And I'm going to zoom back out and I'm going to tackle the anchor points up top here. So using the delete anchor point tool, I'm actually going to delete all of these anchor points because they're unnecessary. We only need an anchor point at either side, which we have, to define this curve here. So anchor points in the middle are unnecessary. However, when we copy across the right hand side to the left, flip it and join it, the central anchor point will reappear, which is fine. So deleting the first, the next, and the last, I'm left with this, and I have my control handles at either side on each one of these anchor points, which I can use to make this curve once again. And I'll go ahead and do that. So using this anchor point, this control handle, I'm going to drag it out to match the pink version beneath. And I only need concentrate on the right hand side because of course I'm going to copy this across in the end. Reviewing that looks reasonably good. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same for the shape at the top. We have a couple of anchor points here, which you'll see. I'm going to delete those. So using the delete anchor point tool once again, there we have it. These two anchor points are defining this curve, so no anchor points need to be between. The only reason why those anchor points between is because we copied across a half and the join wasn't perfect. It must have been overlapping very slightly, and the end result was 3 anchor points. When we come to join again, when I copy across the right side, we're going to be left hopefully with just a single anchor point in the middle, which is true of each shape, both top and bottom. So using this control handle to create that curve once again to match the version at the bottom, bring the control handle in on this side, and there we have it. That's a more perfect curve and we don't have the anchor points between, which could possibly cause disruptions in the flow of the curve. Now the next thing I see is a kind of disruption in this curve here. There's a little hump. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this anchor point and I'm going to use this control handle just to bring this up slightly. and this minimises the little hump that was there. Now I'm happy with that. It's a little over the original shape at the bottom, but that's fine because that's necessary to remedy the problem. So zooming out, with that done, I'm going to go to Object, Ungroup. I'm going to ensure that this is a compound shape. I'm going to go to Expand. Now I'm going to go to that pink layer. I'm going to click the eye so that's no longer visible, and we only left with the version of the logo on the top. Now I'm going to take this shape, I'm going to half it, and I'm going to do so with a rectangle tool. So dragging across a rectangle until it meets the point where the pink line appears, which denotes a central point. Selecting both of these shapes, going to Pathfinder beneath Shape Modes -front. I'm left with the right hand side version, which is the perfect version that we've just created. Using Alt and Shift, I'm going to drag a version across. I'm going to right click, Transform, Reflect. Ensuring vertical selected, I'm going to click OK. I'm going to hold Shift to keep it on the horizontal and drag it across until that pink line appears, which denotes the join, the intersect. With that done, I'm going to select both shapes. Pathfinder panel, make compound shape, expand. Now let's zoom in. You'll see here we have the anchor point again, but that's fine. It's only a single anchor point, as is the one up top. Now let's go down and take a look at the bottom. So zooming in to take a closer look. As suspected, this single anchor point is actually a triple. So I'm going to use the delete anchor point tool to take out these two anchor points. I can keep the one here because it's just defining the left. Now I'm going to zoom out slightly, and I'm going to switch on my pink guide once again in the layers panel, as you'll see, and I'm going to use this control handle and this control handle to redraw this curve. So pulling this control handle down, matching the pink as close to as possible, and I'm going to assign 50% opacity so I can see the pink beneath, raising this very slightly. And turning the opacity back up so I can review this. That looks reasonably good. So I'm going to go to the layers panel. I'm going to turn off the guide. I'm going to ensure that this is a compound shape. I'm going to expand. I'm going to use the rectangle again. I'm going to drag it over till the pink line appears, which denotes a central portion. I'm going to highlight both. In the Pathfinder panel beneath Shape Modes, I'm going to click -front. Alt Shift, drag across a copy, transform with a right mouse click, reflect, ensuring vertical selected. Holding Shift to keep it on the horizontal, dragging across until the pink line appears for the intersect. Highlighting both shapes, go to the Pathfinder panel, make a compound shape, clicking expand, and we're done. So zoom in for a final quick check. Direct selection tool, you see we have one anchor point. Zooming in, confirmed. One anchor point, one anchor point, one anchor point, all the way around, and each of these shapes has one anchor point in the central position and around the curves as it should be. We now have a professional logo design which is absolutely perfect in its form. It has minimal complexity through minimal anchor points, it has a minimal file size and maximum potential since it's been primed to be used for literally any application. Layers are usually used to increase workflow on the basis that everything is in order. So we as designers can easily group and name elements to be able to identify them. In the case of a simple logo such as this, there are very few elements, and so we can work quite easily without having to use layers. We know where things are and we know how they're sorted. For the next person, however, our work must be arranged and presented appropriately and professionally so that they too can identify things at a glance. We need to bear in mind that although the actual client may not access the source files and the layers therein, they are likely to be passing the files to other people in other areas of business, such as printing, for example. They will expect everything to be in order, and when it is, this reduces the hassle we get as the supplier of the original source file. We reduce the back and forths. So this is how we might go about arranging our simple logo into a friendly format so that everyone can understand its composition. So clicking into the layers panel, you'll see that I have one layer. Now if I click the arrow to open it up, you'll see that I have a group. It's because all these items are grouped. If we go to Object, Ungroup, you'll see all the elements now, which are individual. So the first is the symbol, as you'll see by the little picture. The next is the title of the eye, beneath E, Z or Z, D, the stem of the I, and the R. So the first thing I'm going to do is go down the bottom of the layers panel and click Create New Layer. I'm going to double click on the name. I'm going to name this symbol. Next, I'm going to drag the symbol into the symbol layer. I'm going to call layer 1 text. So now we have two layers, text and symbol. Those are the main components that make up the logo. Next, I'm going to go in and double click ellipse. I'm going to name this title. I'm going to double click the name for the E. Name this E, as you might expect. The Z or the Z, I'm going to do the same. And again for the D, double clicking the stem of the I, naming this I. And lastly, R. So expanding the symbol layer, this is a compound shape. You'll see it's got the word comp. I'm going to click the compound shape. I'm going to go to the Pathfinder. Beneath Pathfinders, I'm going to click Divide. And now this gives me the two components that made up that compound layer. These are now separate shapes. So I'm going to name this shape Roof, double clicking its name, which is currently Path, Roof. And I'm going to name this Hood. So I'm going to double click that in the layers panel. So we now have two expanded layers so we can see all the elements within. We have symbol and we have text. Within the symbol layer we have hood and roof, which is these two shapes. And this is color coded red. You can see when I select these, it's got a red outline and a red bounding box. Beneath is the text layer, which highlights blue, as you can see the blue outline and bounding box. And in the text layer I've got title E, Z, D, I and R. So I can go ahead, select all of those characters, go to Object Group. So we have this group now denoted in the layers. In a similar manner, we can highlight all parts of the symbol and go to Object Group, and it'll show you the group in the layers too. Now if we group things, we can still view the elements simply by clicking the arrow of the group. So it expands all the elements for us to see. Now the very last thing that I want to do is just to arrange these letters in order. R, I, D, E, Z. So it reads correctly like the logo on the canvas. So with that done, that's our file prepared, arranged accordingly. Layers are set up into two, symbol and text, and all elements are named appropriately. So that's how to arrange a logo design file professionally, and the person who receives and works with this file will be grateful for its arrangement. So now comes a time to colour the final ride's logo design. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce this in size, and I'm going to create several copies of it, 10 in total, and I'm going to colour each differently using the stipulated colours in the questionnaire of red, black and grey. So copying these, and I'm going to copy across another column. And I'm going to begin the colouring process. Now the first thing I'm going to do is set each of these as a different colour of black or grey. Now some people might argue that some greys are blacks and some blacks are grey. This is just a thing of graphic design. Some blacks don't tend to be 100% black, as you see in the colour slider. We can move it down to 95 and some people would still regard it as a black of a different name. So I'm going to keep the first one the 100% black. Next, I'm going to select the text of the second logo. I'm going to bring this down to 95%. Although you mightn't see a difference on screen, there will be a very subtle difference when it's printed out. For the third, I'm going to bring it down to 88 as a grey. The next, I'm going to bring down to 80 and I'm going to introduce some yellow here. So this gives a different variation of that grey that's up above here. Next, I'm going to bring this down to 80 again, or thereabouts. I'm going to bring up the yellow, and I'm going to bring up some cyan. So as you can see, this provides a kind of different tone of grey again. Next logo. I'm going to bring the black down to 90%. I'm going to bring up the magenta. So again, we have a different tone of grey. And the next logo, I'm going to bring the black down to 70. I'm going to bring up the magenta and the cyan. So again, a different tone of grey. So onto the colouring of the symbol. Now the first thing I'm going to do is to keep the first one as black, because I might want a symbol which shares the same colour as the text. In this case, the colour's black. For the second, I'm going to colour the symbol red, and I'm going to select a red colour from the spectrum here. And I'm going to go for a darkish red for this one, like so. Onto the next. I'm going to use the spectrum once again to select a lighter red than previous. Now this kind of red has resemblance to the red of a petrol can, for instance, so there's some sort of association there. Next, I'm going to select another bright red, but a red that's different from the previous. Like so. This one's perhaps brighter than the last, and this could represent both that petrol can kind of red or the gloss of a car. Obviously we see many bright red sports cars, and so this symbol could be reflective of that. Next, I'm going to do a dark red this time, darker than any we've done previously. I'm going to raise the black on the slider here in the colour palette to create that dark red. Next, at top right, I'm going to choose another red colour, going dark once again, and I'm going to bring the cyan down in the slider ever so slightly, and the magenta down a bit as well. So there we have it, another option at top right. Moving on to the next below. So again, the questionnaire stipulates use of black, grey and red. And so besides red, we can only match the black or greys that we've used in the text, unless of course we choose a different tone of grey. So I'm going to match the grey text in this iteration to give me another significantly different option. Next, I'm going to choose a red. I'm going to select the red in the swatches to begin, and then I'm going to use the sliders up top just for some variation. Bringing up the black, and I'm happy with that. Moving on to the next. Using the spectrum again this time to select another red. I'm happy with that one. So I'm moving on to the last one. And using the spectrum again and the sliders, I'm going to bring the cyan up slightly. I'm going to bring the black up slightly. And I'm happy with that red there. And each one of those goes with the text quite well. So now I'm going to review these logos, and I'm going to whittle down to around 2 or 3 to take to the next stage. Having carefully considered the set of coloured logos, I've came to a decision and whittled down to 3. The first is the second logo down on the left. The text is set to a 95% black. This makes it very prominent without having to surrender to the 100% default, which is quite common. Using this reduced black helps to establish a more unique colour for branding purposes. The dark red symbol works well in contrast, but I do feel I could possibly favour a brighter red. The next colouring which I like is the third logo down, which sees a lighter text colour than the previous, which would be considered in the territory of grey. Paired with a brighter, more vivid red, which looks similar to a petrol can and or glossy sports car, this logo looks effective overall. The final logo in the selection is the fourth one down on the right. I introduced some cyan and yellow into the mix on top of a 75% black. This has resulted in a unique grey colour which functions well against the red symbol, which sits as a medium brightness between the previous 2 logo symbols. So I'm carrying these 3 logos over into a new document to experiment further. And here they are. Not only do I have the original 3 logos, but copies of them which utilise all colour variation of symbol. By doing this, I ensure that I haven't missed a certain combination which might work the best. In the first column, I feel like the second logo down utilises a grey colour for the text, which best suits the dark red symbol. In the third column at the right, I'm torn between the second or third logo down as being the best of the 3. Again, the lighter grey text colour seems to complement the red of the symbol, and vice versa, compromising the dark shade. From initially glancing at this selection, I can tell that I favour a particular aspect instantly, and that's the bright red symbol of the middle column. There's no doubt in my mind that this colour is most suitable for the application. The symbol is a front-facing sports car, and so this sports car should carry high impact brightness. This red achieves this brilliantly. Contemplating further, the prominent red also calls for a prominent colour in the text, and so I'm favouring the top middle logo with the text at 95% black. Needless to say, this will be my final logo, but the final logo which I will take through to yet another stage. Perfection is a product of patience and perseverance. Here we have the final chosen logo design placed in a new document. Now that the logo is isolated, I can review it to see if there are any other possibilities with regards to colour. Now if we think back to the development process, we made a series of alterations to the form of the font. One of these changes was replacing the tittle of the I and making it balanced as opposed to tilted and slightly higher in height. Clicking upon the shape, you'll see that it has a dot in the middle and the cursor changes as we move near it. This denotes an editable Illustrator geometrical shape. As you'll see, I'm able to make changes to this shape which aren't needed now. Now that this is a permanent fixture, we want this shape to be finalized with no potential to edit it. To do this, we go to Object, Flatten Transparency, and we click upon OK. Although the graphic did look fine, it's important to get into the habit of flattening, since certain shapes beside ellipses can look significantly different, even if the logo is merely resized. The client too may make accidental changes of any kind if the shape remains editable. So back to the subject of colour, there was a reason why I drew attention to the tittle of the eye, and it was for this reason. If we analyse the shape of the symbol, we can obviously see that it's a rounded shape. Likewise, so too is a tittle of the eye a rounded shape, or an oval shape to be precise. Now what we can do here is give some colour association, and with that we can give a clear indication that the text is in a relationship with the symbol and vice versa, so that each don't look like separate components that have been carelessly placed against each other, but rather components which complement each other. So the solution's simple. We select the tittle of the eye, use the eyedropper tool to match the colour of the symbol. And there we have the association, which helps to meld both text and symbol together. Now comes the time to finalise the logo design. What's left to finalise is the position of the symbol. During the colouring process, I was experimenting with different coloured symbols. This involved copying and placing symbols next to text without care and attention. Since we've developed the logo with precise accuracy, the position of the symbol will be no exception. And so I'm going to go about placing the symbol in a position that I deem to be perfect for this design. I'm also going to show what alternative positions designers might consider, and I'll highlight reasons why those decisions might not be the best. So let's start by taking this logo and reducing it in size, holding Shift to keep the proportions. And I'm going to create two copies of this. With Alt and Shift, I'm going to bring a copy up here, and I'm going to bring another one down at the bottom. Now, I'm going to show you what people might assume is the best solution in the first example. So you'll see the size of the characters here, and there's going to be a central point somewhere around where the bottom of the E lies. So let's go ahead and draw a line across there with the line tool. I'm going to draw a line from that point of the E outwards to the left where the symbol is. So now we can see the central point of the text on the horizontal. Now, some designers might assume the best solution now is to make sure that the symbol is also centered with the text. So the center of the symbol, if we imagine this to still be a perfect circle, using the keyboard cursors, will be here, as denoted by these two anchor points. Now, if we're to select our makeshift guide, the horizontal line, and delete that, you'll see that the symbol appears too far downwards. And this is because the train of thought neglects the fact that the characters also extend further upwards. So the line, in fact, doesn't mark a central point. The central point would be somewhere up here with these two characters, the stem of the D and the tittle of the I, brought into consideration. So it would be around here. So then the symbol needs to be brought further up for it to appear correct. So let's go ahead and demonstrate on the next instance of the logo. Using Shift and Alt, I'm going to bring down a copy of the guide and I'm going to place it on top of the highest point, which is the tittle of the eye. The D is slightly lower. So there we have the top of the text, the true top. I'm going to copy down another guide here to put at the bottom of the text. Now, at this point, the designer will resize this perhaps so that it fits within those guides, so that the text and the symbol are of the same size. So now let's go ahead and delete those guides to see what this looks like without. Now you'll see that the symbol looks as if it's actually smaller than the text. Most notably, it looks as if the bottom of the symbol is higher than the bottom of the text. And the reason being is because a circular shape only touches the top and the bottom with minimal surface area. So to demonstrate this further, I'm going to draw a square around this symbol. And now you can see that only parts of this circular shape, the symbol, touches the sides of the square. If this was a solid circle, you'd see that only a top portion of it here touches the top of the square, and only a slight portion of the bottom of the circle touches a square also. This is also true of the sides. Now, this is why the bottom of this symbol doesn't look in line with the bottom of the text, because there's minimal surface area at the bottom and the top of the circle. So let's go on to explore the compromise and what I deem to be the solution. So I'm going to copy down this guide, and again I'm going to place it at the very height of the text, which is the tittle of the eye there. And I'm going to copy it again, place it at the bottom of the text. Now, as you'll see, we have a slight overhang at the top and the bottom. I'm going to make this even bigger so that the overhang is even more prominent. And it's this overhang which is going to serve as the compromise so that there's more surface area around the top and the bottom. So we have equal distance between this guideline and the top and this guideline and the bottom. So with that done, I'm going to go ahead and delete all the guides, and you can judge for yourself which one looks the best. So deleting the square and these two guides from the bottom. So as stated, the top logo features the symbol which appears too low, and the middle logo makes the symbol look small and high. So it's my proposition that the bottom logo looks best. We've compromised the issue of lack of surface area and put more of the filled shape at the top and bottom zones. Although the symbol does clearly overhang top and bottom in this compromise, the result is a graphic which appears an appropriate size against the text. The bulk of the graphic is now distributed around the central horizontal area. As such, this logo represents the final and finished piece for Rides magazine. With the Rides logo complete, let's take a look back to recap and summarise the entire design process. First, we started with a completed client questionnaire which contained all information relating to the business and design preferences. Rides is an online sports car magazine aimed at 17 to 40-year-olds. The client was looking for a layout of symbol above or to the left of text depicting a side-facing or front-facing abstract sports car. The client questionnaire was kept close at hand to reference throughout the entire design process. Next up, a well-populated mood board was developed in an Illustrator document comprising of images scraped from Google. The mood board consisted of images of car magazines, logos of car services, and car badges. The mood board gave an idea of the market, helped establish the figurative tone for the forthcoming project, and give way for ideas in the mind mapping process which followed. In the mind mapping process, the company name and subject was written in the centre of a piece of paper. From here we branched out and noted down any idea which came to mind relating to the words rides, sports cars and magazines. From those ideas, other ideas often spawned. In the end, we had a populated page of written ideas and the odd doodle, one of which, an image of a front-facing abstract sports car, paved the way for what was yet to come. The rough sketching stage followed, in which we explored various forms of the front-facing abstract car, which was conceived in the mind mapping process. Through the course of a total of 16 rough sketches, elements were introduced and modifications were made until we reached a solid concept. The result was a sleek circular symbol utilising negative space to depict windshield and headlights of a car, with roof or bonnet stroke hood as the negative space. In order to give us a near perfect sketch to trace over in the software, the car symbol was redrawn with much greater precision at a larger size on dot paper. Once done, the image was scanned and placed into the software. Carefully utilising the pen tool in the software, the symmetrical symbol was developed, copying the best half across and flipping it to form a perfect whole. After carefully selecting a suitable font for the sports car magazine through a strict whittling process, the car symbol was married with suitable and meaningful text. The text was then treated to professional, precise kerning to ensure equal spacing between each character. The text and symbol was then cleaned up of its unnecessary anchor points to give a more perfect result, suitable for hassle-free universal application. Afterwards, some very subtle modifications were made to the E and the tittle of the I to make the font a little more unique. Finally, the logo was treated to colour, a pleasing bright red typical of a shimmering sports car. After some last minute alignment, the logo for Ride's car magazine, featuring a symbol of an abstract front-facing sports car, was conceived and complete. Thanks for your interest in taking this logo design activity. Please see the client questionnaire in the resources. Submit screenshots of your work and I'll take the time to provide one-on-one critique. Please remember to include all stages of planning: mood board, mind map, rough sketches and refinement sketch. I look forward to connecting with you to see your creative efforts.